The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, Episode 01. The Angel and the Good-for-Nothing. Amain Fujimiya is a first-year high school student living alone in a small apartment with no cooking ability, no cleaning habits, and a daily nutrition plan that consisted almost entirely of energy jelly drinks, which is already a grim way to spend your adolescence, and becomes especially ironic once the most admired person at his entire school turns out to be his next-door neighbor. Amain attended Seiho High School and moved through his days with the practiced invisibility of someone who had specifically decided not to be noticed. He was not failing. He was not popular. He had one real friend and a classmate named Itsuki Akazawa, who had broken through Amain's defenses through sheer persistent goodwill and refused to leave. Beyond Itsuki, Amain kept to himself with the ease of someone who had long since made peace with that arrangement. His apartment reflected this entirely. Not destroyed, but comfortably neglected in the way of a person who has decided this is fine when it very clearly is not. Dishes in the sink, laundry in ambiguous piles, the kind of disorder that accumulates when you eat energy drinks for dinner and have no particular motivation to address the evidence. The reason Amain was isolated ran deeper than laziness. Before transferring to Seiho, he had encountered something useful and unpleasant. That people who tried to get close to him often had reasons connected to his family's financial situation, and this discovery, repeated enough times, produced the sensible conclusion that keeping people at a manageable distance was safer than getting burned again. He was not bitter about this. He was simply realistic. He had arranged his current life to minimize the variables, kept his grades decent enough to satisfy his parents' conditions for letting him live alone, and found the whole setup reasonably peaceful. He told himself, on the rare occasion he thought about it, that this was fine. Then it rained. The story begins on a rainy evening with Amain cutting through a local park on his way home and finding a girl sitting completely still on a swing set in the downpour. She had clearly been there long enough to stop caring about being wet. She had the look of someone who had come outside not to go somewhere, but to be somewhere that was not wherever she had been. He stopped. He offered his umbrella. She declined, telling him she was out here by choice and he should not trouble himself. He told her that sitting in the rain was the sort of thing that made people worry. She said she appreciated his concern, but this was her choice. He left the umbrella with her anyway, because what else does a person with a working conscience do, and walked home in the rain. He got cold. He got a fever. He showed up at school the next morning miserable and half-submerged, told Itsuki he had given his umbrella to some girl he passed on the way home, and did not think much of it beyond that. Then Itsuki pointed across the classroom. Amain looked, connected the dots, and went quietly still for a moment. Mahiru Shino was, by the general consensus of Seiho High School, the person who had everything. She sat at the top of the first-year academic rankings, not by a small margin, but by the kind of gap that produced a brief existential reckoning in the students below her. She excelled at every physical activity she tried, carried herself through every interaction with a composed and unhurried grace, helped people with their coursework without being asked, and maintained all of this without ever appearing to strain. Her classmates had, over time, settled on the only word that seemed to capture the sum of her, Angel, and the nickname had stuck. She was, by any reasonable measure, completely outside the orbit of a person like Amain. He had been aware of this and had accepted it cheerfully. He did not have designs on her attention. She was something you appreciated from a respectful distance, like a well-maintained public garden. That was enough. Except he had now given her his umbrella and caught a cold on her account, which was the sort of detail that made the respectful distance slightly complicated to maintain. Mahiru appeared at his door that evening to return the umbrella. She had borrowed it, and it was the correct thing to return what you borrowed. This was simply how she operated. But she found Amain feverish in an apartment that communicated its occupant had done nothing for himself since getting home, and she was, constitutionally, unable to leave this alone. She told him she owed him a debt and would repay it now. He told her that was unnecessary. She stepped past him and looked around the apartment, and the quality of her silence was such that words would have been redundant. She gave him instructions to change clothes while she stepped outside to wait, came back, took his temperature, went to the kitchen, and made rice porridge from whatever she found in his depressing pantry, and sat with him while he ate it. The whole process had the calm efficiency of someone who had been taking care of their own space for long enough that caring for a second one was not a significant effort. She asked why his room was in that state. He said he had not gotten around to it. She did not accept this as an answer, but let it go for the evening. He asked her, since they were apparently talking now, why she had been sitting in the rain. She said she had needed to clear her head. She apologized for the cold he had caught. He told her plainly that there was nothing to apologize for. He had given the umbrella without being asked, and she had returned it, and as far as he was concerned, they were even. Starting tomorrow, they were strangers again. She thanked him and left without argument. He genuinely believed that would be the end of it. The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, Episode 02. The Angel Comes Over. The next evening, Amain was standing at his front door eating an energy jelly drink. Mahiru appeared from next door, looked at the pouch in his hand, and her expression did the entirety of the work. She told him she had made too much food and she would appreciate it if he took the container. He noted that this happening every evening might give people incorrect impressions. She asked whether he actually thought she had feelings for him. He said no. She said then it should not be a problem, handed him the container, and went back inside. The food was extraordinary. He returned the container the next evening. She handed him another one. Within a week, it was simply how things worked, and neither of them formally decided this. It decided itself. Amain understood, on an abstract level, that something unusual was happening. He was being, in some structural sense, looked after by his neighbor, and this was not the kind of thing he had experience with. But the alternative was the jelly drinks and the particular quiet of an apartment that did not smell like actual cooking, and the comparison made the choice easy. He told himself this was purely convenient. Mahiru, for her part, told herself approximately the same thing. She liked cooking for people who genuinely appreciated the food. Amain was a good audience because he never pretended. When he said it was delicious, he meant it, and she could tell. And that straightforward response was a more satisfying outcome than the complicated gratitude she usually had to navigate from people who wanted something from her. He was, she had noted, not trying to get something from her. He was simply there. That was unusual. She decided the room needed to be handled. One afternoon she arrived with cleaning supplies and worked through the apartment systematically. The surfaces, the laundry, the kitchen, the dust that had accumulated in places Amain had not thought to think about. And at each step she explained the process and why it mattered and how to maintain it afterward. Amain did not argue with any of this. He helped where she directed, apologized for the more alarming discoveries, and followed the maintenance correctly in the days that followed. She noted this with a satisfaction she did not voice aloud. The ankle incident formalized what had until then been improvised. Coming home one afternoon, Mahiru had found a cat stuck in a tree and climbed up to help it, and came down too fast and landed on the wrong side, spraining her foot. Amain found her sitting on the ground with one shoe half off and an ankle that was clearly not fine, assessed the situation, and treated it with the first aid supplies in his bag. He was no cook, but minor injuries he could handle. Since she could not walk properly, he gave her his jacket and carried her home. He noted, as he did this, that it was a cliché sort of situation. She told him to be quiet about that. He said fine, fine, and kept walking, and she found his calm rather unexpectedly steadying. He was, she noted with some care, consistently reliable when things called for it. After she recovered, they formalized the arrangement. She would cook at his apartment on a shared cost basis, with Amain paying a modest labor contribution. If either of them had plans and could not eat together, they would say so a day ahead. They would split the shopping and the washing up. Rules were set, conditions were clear. Itsuki, when Amain described the negotiation, said it was the least romantic thing he had ever heard. Chitose, Itsuki's girlfriend, who had been listening since the moment birthday gifts were mentioned in a separate conversation and had stayed for everything, said she could not yet determine whether it was the most responsible or most oblivious start to something she had ever heard, but either way she approved. Itsuki and Chitose were a pair who complemented each other in the way that two very different people sometimes do when both of them are fundamentally good-natured. Itsuki was perceptive and warm and had, in the months since meeting Amain, quietly identified most of what was going on under the surface of his friend's carefully managed low profile. Chitose was enthusiastic and borderline chaotic and cared about people with a directness that tended to arrive before anyone was ready for it. She had already decided she liked the sound of this neighbor and was waiting for an occasion to formalize this opinion in person. The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, Episode 03. The Angel and the Birthday. One evening, Mahiru dropped her student ID on the way out of Amain's apartment. He picked it up and saw, without looking for it, that her birthday was 4 days away. He thought about this for a while, told himself not to think about it, thought about it some more, and then consulted Itsuki the next morning on the subject of gifts for an acquaintance who had been cooking for him for weeks. Chitose, who materialized into this conversation at maximum speed, contributed her own opinions. Together they established that practical items and small cute things were both reasonable options. Amain ended up in a store looking at a display of stuffed animals with the particular mild embarrassment of someone who has already decided what they are going to do and is experiencing a brief moment of self-awareness about it before proceeding. He bought a small bear because it was there and he had thought about it, and hand cream because she worked with her hands constantly and something practical was not wrong. He left the bag at her door with a note on the evening of her birthday. She came to thank him later, and she was quieter than usual in the way that meant something had arrived that she had not prepared for. She explained, without her usual composure, that she never told people her birthday because she disliked the occasion in general, and that she was normally on guard about accepting gifts from people she did not know well. Then she told him he was not a stranger. She held the small bear with both hands, and she did not put it down, and Amain excused himself fairly quickly on the grounds that he needed to go back inside, which was his general approach to situations where he was not sure what his face was doing. The weeks continued. The shared dinners settled into a fixed rhythm around which both of their evenings organized themselves without either of them formally announcing this. They talked during meals with the directness of people who had run out of things to be cautious about. Mahiru, in private, was not the angel. She was precise and occasionally sharp and quietly demanding about standards, and she had a dry humor that arrived without warning because she never said anything simply for effect, which meant when something landed, it landed properly. Amain, in private, was not the invisible student. He listened carefully. He pushed back when he thought she was wrong. He said things to her face that other people would have softened or repackaged, and she found this, after a lifetime of people fawning over her or wanting something from her, genuinely relaxing. They shopped at the same supermarket. This was obvious. It was the most convenient option for both of them, but the first time they ran into each other there, both of them produced the slightly awkward reaction of two people who are technically strangers outside the apartment building and have not fully resolved whether this applies in public. Mahiru was tracking down a sale item limited to one per customer. Amain, when he understood the situation, bought the second one for her without making a large thing of it. She thanked him. He moved ahead to check out so they would not arrive home together, which she noticed, and which communicated to her, without anything being said, that he was being considerate of the implications without requiring any acknowledgement for doing so. Itsuki, who had no idea about any of this until Amain mentioned it one morning at school in a tone of voice that was entirely too casual, looked at him for a long moment, and then said that Amain's complexion was better. Amain said he had been eating more. Itsuki said he also looked less like someone who had made a permanent decision about the general uselessness of the world, which was a different development. Amain told him not to read into it. Itsuki said he was just making an observation. He did not push it further that morning. He did, however, take note of the fact that Amain, for the first time in the months since they had known each other, had started arriving at school having eaten a real breakfast, which Itsuki filed away as the significant data point it was. The cooking lessons became a recurring feature of the shared dinners in the weeks that followed. Amain, by Mahiru's assessment, had approximately zero natural talent in the kitchen, not because he was careless, but because he had never been taught any of the foundational things that people who grow up cooking absorb without noticing they are doing it. He did not know how to test whether oil was hot enough. He did not know what medium heat looked like on his stove as opposed to medium heat in the abstract. He tasted things without knowing what he was tasting for, which meant the feedback his palate gave him was impressionistic at best. Mahiru addressed each of these gaps with the patience of someone who had learned from someone patient, and Amain improved at a rate that was slower than his effort deserved, but faster than most people started from. She told him this. He said that was a charitable reading. She said she was not charitable as a rule, and he should take the assessment at face value. He said all right, and went back to practicing the knife work, which he was better at than the heat management. Exam season arrived. Mahiru topped the year rankings, as she always did. Her classmates received this with their usual reverence. Amain, who had watched her study, who knew how much quiet effort she put into results that everyone assumed were effortless, showed up at her door that evening with a piece of cake and said congratulations. She said she always got first place and it was not a significant achievement. He told her that was exactly the wrong way to think about consistent hard work, and that he was acknowledging it whether she thought it deserved acknowledging or not. She looked at the cake. She accepted it. He ended up sharing it with her, because she offered him a piece and he took it, and neither of them made anything of the fact that an evening that had started as him stopping by to say good work had become the two of them sitting together with cake. He attempted to learn to cook. This was, with full acknowledgement of the effort, a qualified disaster. He scrambled the omelet by stirring it too aggressively and forgot the seasoning, and the result was technically edible in the same way that certain very unappealing decisions are technically legal. Mahiru made a demonstration version and slid it across without excessive commentary, simply showing him what correct looked like. He ate it and understood the difference immediately. She told him the desire to learn was the important part. Then she said, with the care of someone testing an idea, that if he ever learned to cook well enough to manage for himself, she would perhaps no longer be needed. He told her, very directly, that he wanted to keep eating her cooking regardless of whether he learned to cook, and that he knew how that sounded, but it was the truth. She looked at him for a moment. She told him she was not going anywhere anytime soon, and he should relax. He said he was very glad to hear that, and she told him not to look so relieved, and he said he could not help it. The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, Episode 04. The Angel and the Mother. Then Amain's mother showed up without warning. Shihoko Fujimiya was Amain's mother, and she was the human equivalent of an arriving weather system. Warm, impossible to redirect, and absolutely certain everything she was doing was helpful. She dropped by unannounced on the grounds that the only way to check whether her son was actually taking care of himself was to catch him off guard, found his apartment clean and his complexion improved, and then found Mahiru inside the apartment, which caused a chain reaction that Amain could see the beginning of and could do absolutely nothing to stop. Shihoko concluded, at approximately the speed of light, that Mahiru was Amain's girlfriend, and from that point forward, she conducted the entire visit on that premise regardless of how many times either of them corrected her. She called Mahiru by her first name the moment she learned it. She asked Mahiru to take the lead since Amain had zero experience with girls, which she disclosed to a person he had known for 3 months. She informed Mahiru that Amain could be stubborn and occasionally difficult, but was, underneath all of it, sincere and gentlemanly, and that Mahiru had scored a real prize. Amain tried to shut this down. Shihoko was not technically capable of being shut down. He finally got her moving toward the door by pointing out that she was the one paying his rent, and she had worked the next day, and she left on her own terms, which meant she left satisfied. After she was gone, Mahiru mentioned quietly that it had been a while since anyone called her by her first name. Not in years. In fact, her parents used her family name, and even her classmates who were friendly with her defaulted to Shina. She said it was just unusual. Amain thought about this for a moment, then said her name, Mahiru, without announcement, just to demonstrate that it was not a difficult thing to do. She went still in the particular way she did when something arrived unexpectedly, and then said his name back, Amain. They decided, together, to use first names between themselves in private, and to keep this invisible at school. Then, because he had been meaning to mention it for a while since it was inconvenient to use the intercom every evening, he told her she could hold on to the spare key to his apartment indefinitely. She accepted it with the specific attention she gave to things she understood as genuine, and he noticed this, and did not say anything about it. Christmas Eve came. Itsuki and Chitose came over for a small gathering, and it was snowing outside for the first time that season, and Itsuki stepped onto the balcony to see it, and found Mahiru on the adjacent balcony, also looking at the snow. The picture resolved for Itsuki and Chitose all at once. The neighbor, the months of arrangement, the particular quality of the way Amain had been talking about all of this without quite saying what it was. The silence lasted 2 seconds, and then Chitose's reaction arrived and lasted considerably longer. Amain explained the arrangement, both what it was and what it was not, and asked them to keep it between the 4 of them. Itsuki agreed and maintained a very controlled expression that communicated he had a great deal to say and was choosing not to say it. Chitose told Mahiru she wanted to be friends, with an enthusiasm that did not wait for permission. Mahiru, who was not accustomed to people approaching her that way, without calculation, without an angle, simply with the fact of wanting to be friendly, said yes with a slightly surprised sincerity. The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, Episode 05. The Angel Gets Sick. Christmas Day, the four of them shared a meal before Itsuki and Chitose left, and then the apartment was quiet. Mahiru had also asked, before all of this was arranged, whether she could try something she had never done before. She gestured toward Amain's small gaming setup, because she had never played a video game and was apparently curious. They spent part of the afternoon on this, Amain guiding her through the basics of a game that was simple enough to learn in an hour, and Mahiru, who applied herself to things with total seriousness, practiced with the methodical focus she brought to everything until she won a round and celebrated with the kind of unguarded delight that he had only seen from her in small doses. He told her well done and that he could tell she had actually been trying. She thanked him very formally and then proceeded to beat him twice more in a row, which he noted was not beginner behavior and which she did not apologize for. Over dinner, the conversation shifted. Mahiru mentioned the person who had taught her to cook at home, a housekeeper named Koki, who had been more of a caretaker to Mahiru than her parents had managed to be. Mahiru's home situation was something she discussed only in fragments, because the full picture was not one she led with. Parents who were distant in the way of people who had never quite resolved whether they wanted a child, who paid for her apartment and her school and were otherwise absent in a manner that was technically adequate and actually rather cold. Koyuki had filled the gap. She had been the one who noticed when Mahiru was struggling, who fed her properly, who had said the thing about cooking for someone you cared about. Mahiru did not say all of this directly. She said it in the pieces she could manage, but Amain, who had been listening to her for months, heard the shape of what was underneath. She said she had been learning to cook for a future occasion without knowing what the occasion would be. Amain said it was too bad it had landed on him as practice. She said she would consider it a useful run. He told her that her cooking already tasted like joy to him. He said it simply, without performing it, and she went still in the particular way she went still when something arrived that she was not ready for. They exchanged gifts. He gave her a key case, because she was carrying his apartment key and she deserved something decent to carry it in, and tucked at the bottom of the bag, because one thing did not seem like enough. A hand-drawn coupon for one free request. The illustration was not impressive by any artistic standard. She told him it had character, which he accepted as the diplomatic response it was. She asked if she could use it immediately. He said of course. She asked him to put the bracelet she was giving him on her wrist. He noted, and filed away, that the one free request she had thought of immediately was something small she could easily have done herself, and she chose not to. He put the bracelet on for her. She said thank you quietly. Her gift for him was warm and soft in the way of something selected by a person who has been watching you be cold for months and decided to do something about it. He put it on and then told her, plainly, that he had been grateful for everything since this arrangement started, and he wanted her to know he meant all of it, not as performance, just as a fact he had been carrying around and had decided to say out loud. She looked flushed. He noted this and asked if she had a fever. She said she did not. He handed her the thermometer and asked her to prove it. The thermometer said 38.4 degrees, and she tried to read it as 37.2, and he took it from her, read the number correctly, and told her that she was going to rest, and he was going to make sure of it. She had been pushing through a cold for most of the day, the same way he had pushed through his at the beginning of all of this, and he had been watching her do exactly this. He watched over her until she fell asleep. He stayed at her side the way she had stayed at his side. The next morning he was at her door with rice porridge and gelatin cups before she had properly woken up, because he had paid attention that first evening and he knew what she had done and he could do the same now. She came to the doorway and found him there and was quieter than usual when she said she was sorry. He told her to stop. He said he hated seeing the person he spent all his time with get sick. She registered the way he had said that. She told him nobody had ever looked after her like this, in the actual sense of staying through the difficult part, of being present through the morning after. He told her to go back to sleep, and she did, and he sat in the kitchen and thought about what that told him and what he was going to do about it. The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, Episode 06. New Year's Eve came, and Mahiru had spent the previous day over-preparing traditional New Year's food, exhausting herself in the process, and she fell asleep against the couch before midnight settled. Amain went through his options. He could not go through her things for her key. He could not leave her on the floor all night. So he moved her carefully to his bed and took the couch himself. She had been awake the whole time. She admitted the next morning. Testing him, she said. He told her that testing someone's trustworthiness while pretending to be unconscious was not a sound methodology, and that she should not make things unnecessarily difficult for him. She said she understood. She also noted that he had touched her face on Christmas and again last night, and asked whether this was a habit. He apologized. She said, carefully, that it was not that she minded when it was him, but that she was not comfortable with it in general, and the distinction mattered. He said he would remember that. His parents arrived. Shudo Fujimiya, his father, was the quiet, warm counterweight to Shihoko's considerable energy. Among the things they brought was a kimono, which Shihoko announced Mahiru would be wearing to the New Year's shrine visit, along with Amain, and this was not a discussion. Amain's concern was being seen publicly with Mahiru. His mother told him not to get caught. He accepted this. They went to the shrine. The path was uneven and traditional clothing was restrictive, so Amain offered his hand at the difficult spots as a practical solution, and Mahiru took it for the same reason. She prayed for a long time. When she came out, he asked what she had prayed for. She said health and safety, then paused and added that she had prayed for peaceful days like these to continue. He said his mother was not what most people would call a peaceful element. She said that was its own kind of fun. At the end of the day, as his parents prepared to leave, Shihoko took Mahiru aside and told her she hoped she would keep spending time with Amain, that he was stubborn and could have a sharp tongue, but underneath he was straightforward and gentle and the real thing. Mahiru said she was constantly reminded of how kind and sincere he was. Amain heard this and protested that she did not need to say that with him standing there. Then he put his hand on her head without announcing it. She startled and asked him to warn her first. He said he was warning her he might do it again. She told him he was impossible. He noted this was not the same as telling him to stop. Valentine's Day arrived. Chitose came before school ostensibly to consult Amain as a reference point for gift-making, though her actual gift to him turned out to be a box of chocolates, standard-looking on the outside, engineered on the inside with concentrated pepper, wasabi, and pickled plum at a level that had no business existing in something wrapped in foil. He ate one during a free period and spent the next several minutes experiencing consequences. The conversation beforehand, however, had produced something worth noting. Amain said, without quite realizing he was saying it, that what always came first when he thought about Mahiru was not wanting to make her unhappy, and that this was different from how he thought about people he simply found convenient. Chitose did not point this out to him directly, because she understood which observations a person needed to arrive at on their own schedule. That evening there was a small box outside his door. Orangettes, chocolate-dipped candied orange peel, made by hand, not too sweet. A note said she had noticed he did not like things overly sweet and had made something with him in mind. He stood in the hallway with the box longer than he needed to. White Day came, and he had thought about her gift more carefully than he usually thought about things, which was already information. He chose a bracelet and tucked a hand-drawn coupon at the bottom of the bag, one free request, because a single item had not felt like enough, and because small additional gestures had started to feel like the right vocabulary for things he meant, but did not yet know how to say in full sentences. She opened the door and looked at him for a moment that lasted slightly longer than usual. She told him he was too formal, and it was difficult to relax around him like this. He offered to go change. She told him to stay exactly like that. She held the bracelet with the care she gave to things she intended to keep, found the coupon at the bottom, and asked to use it immediately. She asked him to put the bracelet on for her. He did, and told her it suited her, and she thanked him in the particular way of someone to whom the thing means more than the thing. Then she asked when his birthday was. He told her November 8th. She said that by November 8th of the previous year they had already known each other for months, and he had said nothing. He said he had not been sure yet that they were the kind of people who told each other their birthdays. She said they were going to celebrate it properly this year, which meant she was planning to still be spending time with him in November. She said she did not dislike him, and that she felt like herself when she was with him. Then she added, with some urgency, that she had no intentions beyond friendship, and said it in the voice of someone trying to close a door that had been standing open long enough for both of them to notice the weather on the other side. Neither of them said anything for a moment. What they had found, across the months of shared dinners and quiet evenings, was simply the thing of being known, of being around someone who had seen the unguarded version and not stepped back. Neither had found the words for it yet, but they were getting there. In the meantime, that was already quite a lot to have found. The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, Episode 7. Amain Fujimiya is a high school student who lives alone in apartment 501, has zero interest in standing out, and has somehow ended up in a situation where the most admired girl at Seiho High comes over every evening to cook him dinner. That girl is Mahiru Shina, called the Angel by everyone at school for her academic record, her composure, and her general air of untouchability. What nobody at school knows is that the arrangement between them is warm and close and completely invisible to the outside world. Spring break was about to begin, and a quiet vacation was exactly what Amain had planned. Then Itsuki Akazawa arrived at his door with a bag of clothes and a story. Itsuki was Amain's best friend and had been since they met in first year. The kind of friend who saw through Amain's deliberate blankness and decided they were close whether Amain agreed or not. That morning he had argued with his father about his girlfriend Chitose Shirakawa, and he needed somewhere to stay while things cooled down. He asked for 3 days. Amain said yes, then went to tell Mahiru, and that was when Itsuki discovered for the first time that Mahiru had a key to Amain's apartment. He stared at this information for a long moment, revised something significant in his understanding of the situation, and quietly did not say anything about it. He made his observations later, privately, told Amain that what he was seeing was real, that Mahiru trusted him in a way she did not trust anyone else, and that Amain should stop treating that like it meant nothing. Then Chitose showed up at the door as well, because staying in the same building as Mahiru's cooking without eating it was apparently not a thing she was capable of doing. Chitose was Itsuki's girlfriend, and one of those people who treats any social situation as a project to be enthusiastically managed. She arrived with exactly the energy Amain had been hoping to avoid, announced that things were going to be fun, and made good on that announcement for 3 consecutive days. Mahiru made omurice for lunch, because Chitose had specifically requested it, and the food was so good that Itsuki delivered a small speech about how fortunate Amain was that needed no commentary. Amain said he was aware. Mahiru reminded Itsuki that this was not how you spoke to someone who had just cooked for you. Itsuki thanked her and asked for more. After dinner, Chitose took photos. She had permission from Mahiru, she announced, and then decided she needed one of Amain as well, because there was no reason not to. Amain was not given much input on this decision. Later, comparing notes with Mahiru over text, he discovered that Itsuki had apparently been confiding in Chitose, who had been confiding in Mahiru, and that the social architecture of his supposed friendship group was more interconnected than he had realized. He decided not to think too hard about this. By the time Itsuki's 3 days ended and things settled down, the apartment felt quieter than it had before they arrived. But something else happened in those days that stayed with Amain much longer than the noise had. He was walking with Mahiru one evening when she received a phone call. She took it, said very little, and the call was short. When it was over, her face had the particular flatness of someone working to look like nothing had happened. He asked who it was. She said it was her mother, Seo Shina, and added immediately that she was always like that, so there was no reason to worry. Then she kept walking. He said he wanted to hear it, if she was willing to tell him. She stopped. She sat down on a bench and told him plainly. Her parents had not married out of love, and they had not intended to have children. She had been a mistake they had not been willing to correct, and so they had provided for her financially while being present for almost nothing else. The person who had actually raised her was their housekeeper. Her parents came home so rarely that the apartment had always felt like something she was borrowing. She had tried, for years, to be good enough to make them pay attention. It had not worked. Her mother had eventually told her directly that she had never been wanted, and that once Mahiru graduated university, they would have no further obligation to each other. She said all of this without crying, which told Amain more about how long she had been carrying it than the story itself did. He told her he understood, now, where she had come from. Not someone cold, but someone who had learned to be restrained because showing imperfection had never gotten her anything. He told her the people who knew the real version of her liked her very much, himself included, though he said it quickly and moved on before she could look at him directly. He told her she was allowed to cry, that holding it in was not the same as being strong, and that she did not have to perform composure around him. She asked him to keep looking at her. He had made her a promise once, to do exactly that. He said he was still keeping it. She leaned against his shoulder, and he did not move. Later, on the way home, they walked under cherry trees just beginning to come into bloom. Mahiru said she had never liked spring much. Every entrance ceremony and graduation she remembered, she had been standing alone, watching families and friends around her while she had neither. Spring had always meant the pain of that gap. He told her he was there with her right now. She looked at the trees for a moment and said she thought she was starting to like spring a little better. He was fairly sure, walking home that night, that he had already lost whatever argument he had been making with himself about keeping things simple. The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, Episode 8. Spring break ended and the new school term brought with it the possibility that everything would be slightly more complicated. At Seho High, the beginning of second year meant new class assignments, and Amain stood in front of the class roster with the quiet dread of a man who already suspected what he was about to find. He was in Class C, Mahiru was in Class C, Itsuki and Chitose were also in Class C. The universe, apparently, had decided that the carefully maintained distance between his home life and his school life needed to be stress-tested. Itsuki told him this was great. Amain said he did not know what was so great about it. Itsuki said something about enjoying things while they lasted, which Amain chose not to examine. The first morning arrived, and Amain came to school looking off. Not unwell exactly, but carrying something that showed around the edges. Mahiru noticed before anyone else did. She did not say anything at school, because school was where they kept their distance, but later at home, she made her position clear. She wanted him to rest. He was going to argue about this, and she was going to argue back, and he was too tired to hold that ground, so he let her have it. He lay back, and she settled in and started running her fingers through his hair with the patient, unhurried calm of someone who had already decided this was happening. He thought about objecting. He fell asleep instead. He was out for about an hour. When he woke up, she told him his cheeks had more color and that he looked better. She told him that the next time he was struggling, she wanted him to lean on her the way she had leaned on him. He said he would try. She called him pushy for resisting, and then immediately told him girls were supposed to be a little pushy, which was not the logical framework he would have chosen, but he was too rested to argue. She also reminded him, before he could let himself feel too comfortable, that nobody else was going to see her being like this. Whatever happened at home stayed at home. He said that was fine and that he had no plans to bring it up at school. She said good. He pointed out that they had just agreed to keep things separate at school, and she said obviously. He said she seemed annoyed by this, and she gave him a look that suggested she found his observation unwelcome. What she was annoyed by, it turned out, was that everyone else got to be casual with him at school, and she did not. A classmate named Yuta Katawaki, the sort of person the school had collectively decided was charming and well-liked and easy to be around, had apparently decided Amain was worth knowing, and had been making friendly overtures that Itsuki was encouraging. Mahiru had watched Itsuki and Katawaki and Amain talking as if it were completely normal, and had stood at the necessary distance from all of it, and had come home and told Amain with remarkable precision that she found this unfair. He said the angel suddenly befriending a quiet loner like him would raise questions. She told him to stop putting himself down. He apologized. She said she did not want his apology. She wanted him to have some self-confidence, and she was considering taking matters into her own hands and complimenting him in front of people, which he said would kill him. She agreed not to do that. For now. The term brought home economics class, and Amain ended up in the same cooking group as Mahiru, Itsuki, and Chitose, which produced a range of reactions from classmates that Itsuki found very entertaining. The lesson itself went mostly fine until another student got careless with a pan and hot oil when airborne. Amain reacted before he thought about it. He pulled Mahiru clear, and then stood there in the aftermath being watched by the entire room. He told the other student plainly that fooling around near knives and open flames was not something that could be laughed off, and if someone had gotten hurt, he would need to answer for that. The student apologized. Amain helped clean up. The class processed this sequence of events with visible interest. Afterward, Mahiru thanked him quietly. He said he just did what anyone would have done. She told him she was still trying to get closer to him at school without causing problems, and asked him to let her know if things became difficult. He said things were all right for now. She said she was glad, and that she did not want him to feel lonely the way she had felt lonely before. Later, Itsuki apparently decided that Katawaki should know that Mahiru cooked for Amain every day, which he announced at karaoke without particular warning. Amain looked at his best friend with the expression of a man cataloging betrayals. Katawaki took this new information, looked between Amain's reaction and the general situation, and made his assessment. Usually, he said, a girl does not stay and cook for someone she is not interested in. Amain said he would appreciate it if they would give him a break. And then he said, with the tired clarity of someone who had stopped pretending, even if he did have feelings, that was a separate thing, which was as close to a confession as he had ever gotten, and more than he had intended. And the karaoke room was extremely quiet for a moment before Itsuki started smiling. That evening, Mahiru had a small stack of photographs she had been given by Amain's mother. Childhood pictures, the kind that existed specifically to be embarrassing. And when Amain came home and found her looking at them with an expression of delight she was working hard to suppress, he spent approximately 30 seconds deciding whether to be outraged. He decided against it. He sat down next to her and looked at them too, and she let him, and neither of them said anything about the fact that she had apparently been corresponding with his mother in secret, because some things are easier to leave alone. He lay awake that night thinking, with the particular clarity that comes from being slightly overtired, that he was going to have to work on himself. He was done feeling like he did not deserve to stand where he was standing. The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, Episode 9. Golden Week was coming, and Mahiru produced a small handwritten card. She had made it herself, and she presented it with the particular deliberateness of someone who had been considering this for a while. She called it a do-anything-you-want ticket. She said she wanted to use it for one full day of his vacation. Amain pointed out that she did not need a special ticket for that. If she wanted to go somewhere, he would go with her. She said she wanted to use the ticket specifically because the ticket came with terms, and the terms were that he had to agree to whatever she asked without negotiating first. He said this was functionally the same as just asking. She did not answer this. He was clearly not going to resolve it by argument, so he agreed to the terms. Her requests, when she finally stated them, were a cat cafe, shopping, and the arcade. She said she had never been to an arcade. She said she had wanted to visit the cat cafe for a while, but felt odd going alone. She delivered these facts in the sideways tone of someone presenting logistics rather than admitting vulnerability, but Amain had learned to read her by now. What she was saying underneath the logistics was that she wanted to go somewhere she could actually enjoy herself, and she needed someone she trusted to do it with. He agreed to everything immediately. She seemed relieved in a way she did not intend to show, and then composed herself again. Before Golden Week arrived, Chitose came over for a cooking lesson. This required supervision, because Chitose had a history with the kitchen that had produced some instructive incidents, and Amain had specifically asked Mahiru to watch things. Chitose behaved herself, mostly. The lesson went fine, the food turned out edible, and everyone was satisfied. But afterward, Mahiru found Amain and admitted quietly that she owed him a small apology. She had not done anything during the lesson, she said, but while he had been dozing during a break, she had squished his cheeks, and watched him sleep, and ruffled his hair. She reported this with the gravity of someone confessing a genuine wrongdoing, and then added that her position was that squishing someone's cheeks was barely a prank, and she stood by that assessment. Amain suggested that consent was generally the relevant variable. She said he had not objected. He said he had been asleep. They agreed on nothing, but she did not appear troubled by this, which he found both endearing and slightly unsettling. Golden Week came, and the day out turned out to be better than either of them had planned for. The cat cafe was warm and small, and Mahiru moved through it with an unguarded happiness that she made no effort to perform. A small white cat named Silk took to her immediately. Amain watched Mahiru more than the cats, which he chose not to examine closely. She ordered a cat-themed drink, and then could not bring herself to drink it because the little foam cat on top was too cute to disrupt. He found this so specific and so her that he took a photo before she could stop him. She demanded he delete it. He asked if she wanted him to, and she paused, and she said, "Just the one," which was not the answer she had planned to give, and they both let that stand. Amain noticed at some point that Mahiru was getting along with Silk very naturally by the end of their time there. He said Silk reminded him of her, standoffish and hard to approach at first, but very affectionate once she decided she liked you. Mahiru said she was not a cat. He said she was still fairly cautious. She thought about this and did not entirely disagree. Shopping went well until a man tried to approach Mahiru while Amain had stepped back. He was present again within a few seconds and navigated the situation without any particular drama. Mahiru thanked him afterward. He said he just did what was needed. Later she bought him a small stuffed cat from the arcade, a soft white one that looked somewhat like Silk, because she had won it and because he was the reason she had been trying. He said she should keep something she worked for. She said she had made it for him and he should take it. He took it. On the train home, they sat together in the comfortable quiet of the end of a good day. Mahiru said something about self-confidence, told him she was going to praise him publicly if he did not start developing some on his own. He said he would die of embarrassment. She said she would not do it then, but only in private. He said that was fine. She said she accepted him, and that she would say that whenever it was needed, and that she would keep saying it until he believed it. He did not say anything back, but he did not look away either. A classmate named Katawaki had spotted them together at the mall earlier in the day and had figured out, with the efficient social perception of someone who was naturally good with people, that there was something between them. Mahiru asked him to keep it between them. He said he would. He was not in the business of spreading people's private matters, and he had no interest in making things difficult for someone he was starting to consider a friend. This was apparently the point at which Katawaki joined the quiet consensus that Amain's situation was more interesting than it appeared. Back at the apartment that evening, Amain was doing his best to act normal, while internally replaying a dream he had had the night before that had featured Mahiru in a way that had produced an entire day of background discomfort. Mahiru noticed something was off and asked. He said it was nothing. She asked more specifically if perhaps she had done something in his dream. He told her very firmly that she did not need to know the details. She seemed both mortified and privately delighted by this information, and told him she was apparently his first real connection with the opposite sex, which she found to be good news for reasons she did not elaborate on. He told her she was impossible. She agreed, and said she would try not to make it too difficult for him. He was not convinced she intended to try very hard at all. The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, Episode 10. Mother's Day arrived quietly, and Amain mentioned over dinner that he had sent a bouquet and a few small things to his mother, simpler than what he would have done if he had been home, but the distance made some gestures harder to make. Mahiru said she was surprised his parents had let him live alone when he was still in high school, given how thoroughly he had struggled with the basic requirements of looking after himself. Amain said there had been reasons he had wanted to leave. He said it lightly and quickly, as if the sentence were something to step over rather than stand on, and he moved to change the subject. She did not let him. She said she could tell he was not as far over it as he wanted her to believe. She said she was not going to force it, but that it was hard to watch him carry something without being able to help. He held out for another few minutes, and then gave up, because she had a way of just sitting with the silence until he ran out of reasons not to speak. He started from the beginning. His family had been well off, and his parents had been good people, genuinely caring, present in the ways that mattered. He had grown up feeling secure in that. But he had been too trusting, he said, too willing to assume that the warmth he got at home was a reliable map for how people outside it operated. He had made friends easily, picked up the bill without thinking about it, smoothed things over when things needed smoothing. Then one day he overheard a conversation that rewrote everything. The people he had considered his closest friends were talking about him with the easy contempt of people who had never really seen him as a person, just as someone useful to have around, particularly when things needed paying for. He heard his own name treated like a punchline he had not been told he was part of. He had not known what to do with that information except leave. He could not go back to being the person who trusted too easily in a place where that had already been used against him. He could not stay somewhere that had become a map of his own mistakes. So he moved to a new city where nobody knew him, and he enrolled in a new school, and he became someone who kept his head down and his distance and was very careful about what he let himself need. Mahiru was quiet for a moment after he finished. Then she said she would have stood up for him if she had been there. He told her not to hurt herself over old history. She told him that his pain was not less meaningful just because other people had had harder things happen to them. Pain did not work on a comparative scale, and she was not going to let him use someone else's suffering as a reason to minimize his own. She said she wanted to support him. She wanted him to depend on her, the way he had let her depend on him when she needed it. He said he was already depending on her too much. She said he was not depending on her nearly enough, and she intended to change that. He called her pushy. She confirmed that she was, that she liked to repay what she owed, and that he had taken on a great deal of what she owed when he had let her lean on him before. It was his turn. He would get change back. She would keep asking until he stopped resisting. He looked away from her. He said he did not want to be the kind of person who leaned on someone else like that it felt wrong to him, for reasons he could not fully articulate without admitting more than he was ready to admit. She told him she was very aware that he was a guy, and that she did not think that was the issue, and that he was missing something obvious. Then she put her arms around him from behind, quietly and without warning, and told him not to turn around. He stayed still. She called him a dummy, and her voice when she said it was not annoyed. It was the tone of someone who has finally gotten through to where they needed to get to and has no interest in retreating. He sat there and thought, with the particular clarity of someone who has stopped arguing, that she was right, and that he had known she was right for a while now, and had been working very hard not to know it. The following days brought a study session at Amane's apartment. Itsuki, Chitose, and Katawaki all arriving to prepare for midterms, with Mahiru cooking and organizing things with the quiet efficiency she brought to everything. Katawaki watched her move around Amane's kitchen like it was somewhere she had always been, and made the observation that she looked very natural there, which everyone in the room understood and nobody commented on directly. Chitose studied with the desperation of someone who had underestimated the calendar. Itsuki helped her. Amane worked harder than he had in years, because he had a goal and a reason, and both of them mattered. Mahiru told him at one point, in front of everyone, that she loved taking care of him and that she planned to keep doing it, that he should relax and stay exactly as helpless as he was because she was not planning to stop. He stared at her. She looked back. Katawaki decided he needed some water. Itsuki started counting something under his breath. At school, a classmate had apparently seen Mahiru and Amane together at the mall during Golden Week and asked about it. Mahiru, in front of several people in the hallway, said that Amane was the person dearest to her in the world. Not a boyfriend, she qualified, but dear. And then she let that sentence stand without apology or explanation. Amane heard about this secondhand and spent most of the afternoon being quietly unable to look at her directly, which she found extremely funny. He thought, walking home that evening, that he needed to figure out what he was going to do with all of this, because it was only going to get harder to pretend the obvious was not obvious. The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, Episode 11. The midterm results came back and Amane finished 6th in the year, which was the best he had ever done and the direct result of studying harder than he had thought he was capable of. Mahiru finished 1st, which was not a surprise to anyone. She told him he had earned a reward for working so hard, and he assumed she meant something small, a specific meal, maybe, or something from the store. What she meant was that she wanted to clean his ears for him. He processed this information at slightly below his usual speed. She had a kit and a comm and a plan, and she had apparently thought about this enough to have formed an opinion on how to proceed. He lay back with the careful stillness of someone who has decided the dignified thing is to stop resisting, and she worked slowly, asking him every few minutes whether it was comfortable. It was comfortable. It felt, he admitted when she asked directly, quite nice. She said she was glad. She asked whether he found it romantic. He said he supposed he did, which was more honest than he had intended, and she received this information with the expression of someone carefully not smiling. When she finished, she said she wanted to play with his hair for a while, and he told her to do whatever she wanted, which she took as permission immediately. She said his hair was very soft, that she had always noticed that she was sorry she kept touching it without asking. He told her he liked it when she touched him. She informed him that saying things like that made things difficult for her, and he should be more careful. This was not a complaint. She kept touching his hair anyway. He fell asleep. He seemed to do this a lot lately, not from boredom, but from some specific quality of being near her that let his defenses come down far enough that his body simply decided it was safe to rest. He had moved to a new city specifically to be somewhere he did not need to trust anyone. He had failed at that project completely, and then it was her turn. He was not sure when it happened exactly. He had been drifting in and out, but at some point the evening had grown late, and she had gone quiet, and when he became properly aware of things again, she was already sideways, leaning against him with her eyes closed. He sat still for a long time. Then he made the only decision available to him, which was to get her home. She gave him her key while she was still mostly asleep, which was the most trusting and helpless thing he had ever been given, and he filed it carefully in the part of his memory he tried not to think about too often. He carried her back to apartment 502 and let himself in for the first time. The room was organized and quiet. Recipe books lined neatly on a shelf, a row of stuffed animals she had apparently accumulated. He left her somewhere safe and left a stuffed bear in his place beside her because that was the only solution that presented itself, and he did not stay to second-guess it. He took her key home by accident. She came to his door the next morning to get it back. He returned it. She thanked him, and then she said there had been a framed photograph on her desk, and the way she said it, slightly sideways and in a lower register than usual, made it clear this was what she had actually come to talk about. He had not seen it, he said, because he had tried not to look around too much. She was visibly relieved and then immediately embarrassed again, because he had also seen the stuffed animals, including the bear he had given her, which she was apparently sleeping with. This information set off a chain of clarifications that resolved nothing except to establish that they were both flustered and neither of them was going to admit the obvious. Summer arrived and the school switched to lighter uniforms, and one morning Mahiru knocked on his door before school and asked if anything looked odd. The change to summer clothes had left her wearing tights, but she asked about it before putting them on. He was very clear, in the slightly strangled voice of someone exercising considerable restraint, that she should absolutely put them on and not walk to school without them. She said she had brought the tights with her all along. She had wanted to see how he reacted. He told her she was going to give him a problem. She said she had learned what she needed to know and would put them on now. This was exactly the kind of thing that was becoming more frequent and which he had no good defense against. At school that afternoon, he overheard a cluster of girls in the hallway talking about Mahiru in the way that people talk about someone they resent without quite being willing to say so directly. He was angry about it and had to make a deliberate choice not to say something. When he brought it up to Mahiru later, she was not devastated. She had placed it in its correct category, a reaction not to her as a person but to the position she occupied and the frictions that position created. She had made her peace with not being universally liked. What she was more tired of, she said, was the constant performance, the careful and correct angel who never showed her edges. She was starting to want to just be herself. She asked him to keep watching her, the way he had promised. He said he would, and then he admitted, because he was trying to be honest, that part of him was uncomfortable with what it would mean if she opened up more, if other people got to see what she was like and found that they liked it. He had no clean right to say that, but he said it. She stared at him for a moment, and then she called him cute. He argued with this. She said she would close his mouth if he kept arguing. He asked how. She said with her hand. He did not push it further. She told him he was someone very special, the most genuinely cool person she knew, and she said it with the direct simplicity she reserved for things she actually believed, looking straight at him. He ran out of counter-arguments entirely. The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, Episode 12. Amain had been called cute, been told he was someone very special, and had been informed that Mahiru would close his mouth if he argued about it. And the next morning, he came to school looking like a man who had not finished processing any of that. Itsuki and Katawaki observed his condition from across the cafeteria and held what they described, at unnecessary volume, as an emergency meeting of a committee dedicated to the problem of Amain being too cautious for his own good. He told them to mind their own business. They said this was their way of rooting for him. He said they were terrible at it. They agreed and continued anyway. Sports Day was approaching, and the event sign-up sheet revealed that both he and Mahiru had chosen the scavenger race. Chitose was on the event committee and specifically in charge of that race. This information sat in Amain's stomach like a stone. He had nothing to base it on except the general principle that whenever Chitose was specifically in charge of something involving the two of them, the outcome tended toward the unexpected. He signed up for the bag toss as well, partly because it was genuinely the event he was least terrible at, and partly as an act of self-preservation. The distance between them kept failing to hold. At lunch one day, Mahiru absent-mindedly shared a drink with him before catching herself. She apologized. He said to keep it. She said she was trying to maintain the distance they had agreed on. He said so was he. They sat with this for a moment and then let it go, because the agreement was difficult to enforce when what they had built at home was constantly pulling them back together like gravity. Sports Day arrived on a clear morning. The 41st annual event at Seiho High had its usual organized chaos, and Amain went through his first event without distinction but without disaster. Then Chitose ran the relay. He had not known she was fast. She had never mentioned it, had apparently decided in high school that the social complications of her middle school track career were not worth revisiting. After a senpai who had feelings for Itsuki had found Chitose's better race times less than endearing. She had walked away from the team. She had not, it turned out, walked away from the ability. She ran her relay leg with the smooth, controlled power of someone who had simply been waiting for a reason to stop holding back, and the watching crowd revised their understanding of who Chitose Shirakawa was in real time. Then came the scavenger race. The format was straightforward. Each runner got a card describing what they were looking for, found it in the crowd, and brought it to the finish line. Amain drew his card. He read it. He looked up and found Mihiru immediately without trying, which had stopped feeling remarkable because he always knew where she was. His card said, "Someone I think is beautiful." Across the field, Mihiru had read her card and was already moving toward him. Her card said, "Someone very dear to me." They crossed the finish line together from both directions at the same time, and then the announcer read their cards aloud into the microphone, and for half a second the field was completely silent. Then it was very loud. The interrogation at lunch was thorough and delivered from multiple directions simultaneously. Amain asked to be addressed one at a time. They established the basic facts. He and Mihiru had been neighbors since the previous year. They had known each other that whole time. They had acted like strangers at school because they had known this would happen. Were they together? He said they were not, but that he was not indifferent to her. A classmate said it was strange that someone like her would choose someone like him, and used the word dull. Mihiru was sitting beside him. She turned to the classmate and asked them to explain, specifically, what they found dull about Amain. The classmate mentioned his looks. She asked whether they were under the impression that physical appearance was the correct basis for choosing someone to spend time with, and whether that was a standard they would want applied to themselves. The classmate did not have a clean answer. She said, Amain was thoughtful, kind, genuinely calm in a way she found wonderful, a true gentleman, someone who stood beside her when things were hard and never once made her feel reduced. She said the person she had chosen to care about was not a subject available for outside commentary. She added a brief apology for perhaps going slightly too far. Then she turned back to Amain and suggested they eat lunch together. He walked home that afternoon with one thought. Tonight. He had the words. He had been assembling them for weeks without admitting that was what he was doing. She came to his door first. She apologized for the scavenger race, for building something that put his feelings on display before he was ready. He said he had known it was deliberate and that he was not angry. She seemed relieved, and then kept going into a longer apology. She had seen what was between them before he had named it, and had done nothing, because she was afraid to be wrong. She had waited when she should have said something. She was sorry. He said he had done the same thing. He had known for months and had found reasons not to act on it, because needing something and being refused had a history in his life, and that history had made him careful in ways that sometimes looked like wisdom. They had both been cowards. They were, apparently, a match set in that as in most things. He asked to go first. She said yes. He told her about coming here to start over, to need nobody, to keep things small and safe. He told her she had not been part of any plan. He said that at first she had been cold and difficult, and he had kept her at the usual distance. Then somewhere in the months of dinners and conversations and quiet evenings, distance stopped feeling safe and started feeling like loss. He wanted to know everything about her. He wanted to be near her. He had held back because he was not sure he was worth it, but she had told him he was wrong about that, in various ways, on various occasions, and he had finally stopped arguing. He had said it all in his head many times. He was saying it now. He told her she was the person he wanted to hold close and never let go of. He asked her to go out with him. She said yes. She told him she had been afraid of being too slow, that someone else would see what she had seen, and she would have missed her moment by waiting too long. She said she had been watching him with the quiet urgency of someone who was not sure if they would get there in time. He said she was the only person he knew with unusual enough taste to have picked him. She told him he was doing the thing again. He said he was going to work on it, that he intended to become someone who did not look so unlikely standing next to her. She said he was already there. He told her he intended to treasure her. He would make it his one ambition. She said okay. He meant it completely, with nothing held back, and she knew it.